So quite recently, I took a stab at mastering the set for Pokemon Colosseum and its subset, which is Espeon Umbreon only, and it made me think about Colosseum a lot more, which cool. But at the same time, I kind of want to go through and tier list all this. I was going to do a very old style tier list of back in the day. I did a bunch of um, you know, basically the Gen 1 in-game tier list and part of Gen 2, which I never finished. But I was going to do that style and kind of bring it back and do multiple games. But I think this is the better way of going about it for Coliseum specifically, and possibly XD if I get around to it. But we're going to talk about what these tiers represent real quick, because I probably should have said it earlier. S is almost a guarantee. Like, you're going to want to use this at some point or another. A is a really good. It does multiple things. It's either great utility along with decent damage. It's amazing damage with decent utility. It has the ability to do something and facilitate a team that is a lot rarer or whatever have you. There's something unique about A. B is there's maybe a better option and it may have something unique, but it's not overly strong in that uniqueness. C is just middle of the road. Usually there's a better option. D is a pretty bad Pokemon, all things considered. And it has a 2 fucking late tier, which honestly, I'm just going to get rid of because it doesn't really matter for this. But yeah, let's get started. We're going to talk about Umbreon and Espeon. So Espeon, if you don't know, is S tier. One, if you look at the psychic types you have access to, being that there is, let me do a quick scan. Not a lot. I mean, Metagross is at the end of the game. You don't get access to a lot of psychic types, if any. Yeah, that counts with huge power. Woo. Like, when people talk about there being psychic types in Colosseum, there really isn't. One's at the late stage of the game, and you're not using the psychic moves on Metacham. You just aren't. So you're stuck with basically what is Espeon as your only big special attacker, unless you're going to use an electric type in Raikou or a few other really good special attackers. I guess you could call Suicune pretty good. We'll talk about this later, but Houndoom, cool. But overall, Espeon is just one of the best Pokemon in the game, and it's given to you. There's no struggle for it. Umbreon, on the other hand, is A. Now, this is low A. It does stuff a lot better than you would think. It has access to Bite, which, don't get me wrong, isn't fantastic. But considering that you have Umbreon since the start of the game, it has a lot of utility. And Bite being able to flinch, Secret Power being able to paralyze, it gets access to Taunt. You can go with some Light Skin Reflect. It gets Toxic. Overall, there's a bunch of stuff you can put on Umbreon to make it much more usable. I do think it's low A. It's almost I would argue it's more low A than top of B, merely because of its dark typing. It's not like an amazing typing that comes out of nowhere. I mean, I just highlighted 2 that you're never using that, but overall, there's very little reason to say it's the worst dark type, and there's also very little reason to say it's the best. But in that category, it's one of the tankiest Pokemon in the game. In fact, I would argue it's probably the one with the best matchups in the game, because the big weakness of having both Espeon and Umbreon is the shared bug weakness, which we'll get into Bayleaf in a second with also that bug weakness. But there's not a lot of bug types that have access to bug moves, just in general. Gen 3 did not have a lot of that. It's why a lot of Pokemon that were bug type stuck with Hidden Power Bug as their best stab move in competitive, and it's also why in game like Silverwind, I think is in. I don't think, maybe Ariados has like a bug move. I don't think so. I know there's Leech Life somewhere, but 20 power in this game, it's not great. And I would love to go into the 3 starters, which are gonna have pretty different opinions. But I'm trying to find Makuhita. Here it is. Makuhita, I do think, is a B tier. I do think its Health Sponge kind of puts in the same boat as Umbreon of being a good tank. Gain access to a lot of fighting type moves, which is okay. It's not an overall great typing, but it does counter a few of the weird steel types that you'll run into, or even the rock types. There's a decent amount of rock types. Plus, fighting type does counter a few of the weirder types that you're going to come across. The problem is it's not overly great for like being able to catch a lot of stuff. I do think it's a great tank and it does have usability, but this is not my preferred fighting type, which we'll get into a bunch later. We're going to talk about Bayleaf, Quilava, and Croconaw, and they all three go in different tiers. Bayleaf sadly gets stuck in B tier merely because it shares the same weakness, and while it does have the tanky usability with Umbreon, with a little more damage, with a lot less utility, it doesn't have the power that makes it really stand out. Yes, it has access to its grass moves and Razor Leaf, woo, which is weaker than Bite in this case. It can facilitate a pseudo Sun team, but you're rocking Solar Beam, I guess, and that's it. Like that's all you're getting out of it. Yes, it does have Synthesis, I'm pretty sure. It gets access to Body Slam, which is really good. But overall, you aren't doing great things with Bayleaf. Whereas Quilava, I do think, is one of the stronger A contenders, and I will even put Croconaw as the leader of the three starters. A lot of this has to do with type matchups in the game. Whereas Bayleaf does, the reason it's not in C is because it has a great matchup when you're forcing to go and capture Raikou and a lot of the electric types. Having a resistance against electric is amazing, especially since, as you can see, there's not that many ground types that facilitate a immunity. So we have to go with resistances. And if you look at it, you're taking neutral. There's an immunity. Sunflora is garbage. There's not a lot of options to do this, and Bayleaf does have a use there. Quilava and Croconaw, on the other hand, facilitate a much more damage approach, which is really good paired with Espeon, because it usually means you can one-shot one side and one-shot the other. Not to mention that Croconaw, once purified, will instantly evolve, because usually you've given it enough experience to get one level up. Meaning Fear Alligator is packing Surf, which even on a weaker special attack is still hitting both sides with Stab. That's really, really good. Not to mention that at the same time, why Quilava is almost past it is it has a lot of damage coming off of one side. Fire attacks, it has access to Dig early, which doesn't mean it's great. I do want to point out it is weak to Earthquake, which is a big problem in Mount Battle and a few later encounters in the game. It does counter a lot of steel types. It also has a great matchup against certain, I don't want to say like certain boss fights, but like most of the enemies in the game that aren't boss fights. Croconaw is good for basically everything, with the exception of Ein. Whereas Quilava isn't great, or at that point Typhlosion isn't great for Ein. It's also not great for really any of the bosses in general. It's just good for every trainer you're coming across, which is something to be happy about. Now, this is in a whack-ass order, because like I'm not going to go in the proper order. We're just going to go in this order. We're going to talk about Fur, which you actually get quite early, and honestly, it's very underrated. I do think Fur is one of the best Pokemon you can pick up early. It does fall off pretty hard by the late game, but does have access to a few utility moves. Its speed is amazing, and overall, it could be a very good utility kind of chip down Pokemon. I do think if you're going to use Umbreon, you're not going to use Furret, because this is having 1/3 of your team be this terrible at damage is not a good option, but maybe you can make it work. Noctowl, I do think having Hypnosis is good, but I ultimately think it doesn't have much else. It doesn't pack the amazing like special flying moves it would get later, or even Echoed Voice that it learns later, past Gen 6. But like overall, it isn't a great Pokemon to have. Yes, flying types are actually really, really good in this game, because Earthquake is quite prominent not only on your side but on the enemy side, but it doesn't have enough utility to be great. I think there's a way better option in a flying type, and at the same time, while Hypnosis is special, because I think literally there's only like one other Pokemon that gets a sleep move in Sleep Powder. I'm trying to think, is there anybody else that gets a sleep move? I think this has Hypnosis. maybe. Um, I'm pretty sure it does, but overall, it's not like a standout like Pokemon. Um, if it had stab flying moves that were good, besides fly, it would be amazing. I will say fly being amazing utility in this game. Ladian is garbage. Not only do you get it past the point where it could actually do a lot of damage, because at that point I think you have access to about 15 to 20 shadow Pokemon. It's about mid range of the game, I'm pretty sure. I might be thinking of it a little too early, but whatever. It's bug flying means it's quad weak to rock, which doesn't matter really because Rock Tomb doesn't appear. There's like one trainer with Rock Slide, I'm pretty sure. The flying type is helpful. It does have access to dual screens, which is special, but it just takes too much damage. It's not as bulky as Umbreon or even what eventually is Hariyama. It doesn't really succeed in a lot of stuff. Plus, his damage is somehow less than Umbreon's, which is depressing. Um, which goes into Ariados. Now, if we're being honest, Ariados at face value is pretty miserable. I happen to disagree and think that it definitely isn't the best you could pick, but with access to Sludge Bomb and a few of the other utility moves it does have access to, is a usable Pokemon. We are in Colosseum land where this is all we have access to, so this is usable. Great? No. But usable. This is too late in the game to matter, and even then, in my opinion, Togetic is just a bad Pokemon. It does get Wish, I'm pretty sure, in this, and Follow Me, and or maybe Follow Me is Gen 4, but it gets access to some TMs. It's usable in some stuff, but this is too late to really matter. But A, we'll put in D for fun. Flaffy. Now, immediately as you purify it, you'll get access to Ampharos, and I do think this is one of the best Pokemon in the game for a variety of reasons. And in fact, I will be moving it up here. Not only does it have a weird speed that can throw off a lot of stuff, which is not necessarily a good thing, it has the perfect type to draw certain moves to it. Being that it is an electric type, if the Pokemon you're against has Earthquake or Dig, it will try and do it. It will see the damage. It's similar to Quilava in this case, but Quilava it's fast, so it feels really bad to use Protect on it, whereas this is slower, and you can play kind of a pincer game around the turn order when you're in a double battle. So in this case, let's say we have Espeon out, for instance. Espeon's going to be faster than most things in the game. You're going to see an Earthquake. You're going to go for the guy that, one, is maybe throwing out the Earthquake to kill it, and so it doesn't do Earthquake, or you're going to throw out the partner Pokemon to kill that, because it's either immune or it will die to Earthquake, and then you protect with Ampharos at that time. Plus, you have an amazing electric type, which goes along with a lot of the flying Pokemon you're going to encounter. It has access to static, which is actually really, really good. There's a lot of stuff with Ampharos that I think is very underrated in this game. It's super strong. Like, super, super strong. Sudowoodo. I never get to use this Pokemon that much, but actually, it's kind of good. The reason a lot of people don't use it that often is because it is weak to water in general. It doesn't have an amazing move pool, but it has a workable one. I do think Sudowoodo is best paired with a Pokemon that has really good speed options. Espeon, Typhlosion, even Furret is a decent thing because Sudowoodo does have damage. It has really decent attack. It just needs a little bit of help to get there. I do think of all the B tiers I've ranked so far is the one that needs the most help on the team side. And Furret can give the most help. Skiploom into Jumpluff. Now, I'll be honest, this is basically utilities. There's access to Sleep Powder. Its move pool is pretty shit. You're waiting a long time for any like good stab options in the grass department, and its ability is not going to be useful to you in this game. But it does have the ability to draw ice moves if you really care, rock moves if you really care, and at the same time, it is really fast, which, as we talked about Furret earlier, even though Furret has more utility options, Jumpluff is able to do some fast sleeping. Apom, I think Apom is actually just bad in this game, but it's saved by the fact it is insanely fast and it has some good usability. It's probably the top of C just because it's speed. It comes really late in comparison to a lot of stuff. Sunflora is also pretty late, and you can do Sun Teams, and that's basically it. It does get a decent move pool in this game in comparison to some of the other Pokemon, but yeah. Yanma is one of the worst Pokemon in the game. It does get speed boost. I don't remember if Baton Pass is even viable. I think it's like really late level up. But it does get access to a few damaging moves I think put it better than Ladian in this game. But not too much. Quagsire. Quagsire, I think, is actually S tier. Not only is it immune to electric type moves, which is perfect for Ein, it is amazing in having access to both Surf and Earthquake, hitting both enemies with Surf and having Earthquake on your side is just amazing. You're hitting two things. It's a little weak, which is why it's not top of S, but access to stuff like Water Absorb, having the ability to not only be a decent tank because it is kind of tanky, and also wear down opponents in a almost bruiser-like fashion. I've always pictured Quagsire as the bruiser of the Colosseum squad, and well, that's basically what it is. Murkrow. Murkrow, I think, is actually kind of interesting. It gets not a great move pool, but its speed tier is really nice, and is a dark type and flying type, which is really cool. Having two immunities is really nice. Sucks for Ein because it's going to be outsped and killed, and at the same time, going back to it, the move pool sucks. Misdreavus. Sadly, even though it is the only ghost in the game, which is why it's even this high, it's too weak to really do much. Not only is Shadow Ball coming off a pretty miserable power spot, its move pool is very limited unless you give it TMs. Now there's moves like Thunderbolt you could do Mount Battle for, which cool, or Shockwave if you want to just collect the TM, which I think is in one of the Colosseums in game. Don't really remember, but like there's some stuff you can like use this for. It is not a terrible mon, and in fact a lot of the Pokemon you're going to come across use a normal move in their moveset, so being able to block a lot of stuff is amazing, and it's why it's here. I do think though that it's a little too weak, and it doesn't get a lot of super effectives, which is a problem. Fortress. I actually think Fortress has a lot of usability in this game. Not only is it Bug Steel, meaning that its only big weakness is fire, which there are kind of a few fire types if you just look at the available Pokemon left, but just in general there's a few random fire types that appear, and there's also just some odd Pokemon that have fire moves in general. But it does have access to Explosion, which is actually pretty good in a double battle scenario. I mean, put Protect on Espeon and then you explode and kill whatever it is. It's really good in the final fight of the game, which is actually kind of hard if you're at even levels with it. Fortress overall, it does have a lot of usability, and I do think if you plan it right with Hidden Power, this could be an S rank mon. But sadly, Hidden Power isn't available for much. I think you get Hidden Power. I'm pretty sure you might get it in postgame, but Dunsparce, I actually think this has a pretty usable case. It's tanky, it has access to Glare. What's not to love? I do think it can, honestly, yeah, you know what? As I think about it, I think it moves up. Dunsparce has a lot of usability. It's slow, which is kind of problematic, but it has some utility. It's tanky. It can actually hit decently hard, a little harder than Furt. Yeah, you know what? We'll put it there. Gligar, I think this Pokemon sucks. It gets no good stab. I think its only good stab is like Mud Slap, right? I don't can it even learn Earthquake by level? Who cares? It's a flying type, so it's automatically in C because it has some usability, and it's also immune to Ein. But the problem is Rain Dance is up, and while I don't think there's that much threat in the water department, it's basically dead anyway. I do think it's better than Ariados, barely, but under Noctowl's utility with Hypnosis. Grand Bull, Intimidate. Do I need to say more? I do think it is the worst one of the Intimidates, which we'll get into. But its normal move, it has a good move pool. It has access to Strength, which hits hard. You could put Earthquake on it, though I would probably play on a few other things before then. Yeah, overall Grand Bull is a very good pickup. Quillfish, I actually think this Pokemon is really sick. It sucks that it's a water type for a lot of this. Like, you can get it quite early, and that's fine. Not quite early, but early enough to where it's usable in a lot of cases. Its poison typing is fine, and its water typing is fine. It just has a lot of options to kind of fulfill certain roles. If you missed out on a water type in Quagsire and you skipped Croconaw, I can actually recommend Quillfish. Um, it's not amazing, but it'll get the job done. Shuckle, I think, is actually unusable for most people. I do think it's better than, you know what, I think it's better than these two. Yeah, Heracross I think is actually good because Brick Break is available in this game. It comes really late, and the quad weakness to flying is a problem. Um, but it does handle the enemy uh, team really well. Actually, and this is probably going to be the first time I let this uh, kind of influence my decision. I am going to put Heracross pretty high up here because outside of the in-game, if you do Colosseums with only in-game Pokemon, Heracross is one of the best for it. Sneasel is really bad, but it does have Dark typing, and it does get good stab options. It's not great, but it'll work. Ursaring comes pretty late, but it is a normal type. We would, in fact... wait, this doesn't... I'm thinking of XD. When do you get an Ursaring? I don't remember Ursaring. Maybe it's at the battle tower with all the shadow Pokemon. I'm just thinking because I could place almost all of these. Where the fuck is Ursaring at? Okay, I'm gonna think about it for a second. Like, just no, I can't think of where you actually get this. Sorry, I should have looked at an availability list apparently. But we'll rank it as if you get it before the final battle, and that's it. Just to be fair, I'll put it at B. Ursaring has decent attack. It's a little slow, whatever. Now, Slugma you think would be great for having a fire type, and it also gets a decent stab move setup. Problem, it's quad weak to Earthquake, which we've already discussed as being a problem, and it's quad weak to Surf, which doesn't come up as much as you would think, but is affected by Rain Dance a lot, and at the same time, its stats are pretty miserable. On the other hand, though, it does actually do some decent shit. So we'll put it above Sunflora, but below Ariados. I think Sludge Bomb has some usability. Pilot Slime, ground type, gets access to a decent ice move. I do think it does some stuff better than you would think. Remoraid, funnily enough, Remoraid could have been one of the best options in the game. It starts lower than every other Pokemon, but if you're willing to stick to it, I do think it actually becomes really, really good. It's a little slow as a Octillery, but its move pool is wide and varied. Delibird is almost useless. Actually, I think I am going to put this at bottom. Mantine. Mantine is actually really interesting in that it is a flying type. It sucks against Iron so badly. It is water. It just kind of sucks for damage. I'm going to put it at the top of C. And then we get Skarmory. Skarmory also comes in pretty late. But a lot like Fortress, it actually has a good encounter against the final boss. And it's also just really good for tanking, which, I mean, is pretty special. But it comes up super late, and I do think there's better flying options. And I think Fortress ultimately is the better steel type in this scenario. I will say it's a little under Sudowoodo. Houndoom, fire dark type. If you're not using Umbreon and another fire type, and you've waited this long, it does hit like a truck. I do think it leads B clearly. It's almost an A tier, except its best moves are locked a little bit later. And I'm gonna be honest, I think this Mon is one of my favorites. I do think Stantler is really good. Not only does it have access to Intimidate, it has access to great stab move, and I'm pretty sure it has Stomp, which, yeah, okay, cool. Stomp is very weak. It has Flinch Chance. It's one of the faster Pokemon in the game, especially once you start leveling up with it and you get EVs. It has a great matchup in being an Intimidate user, has some utility, can learn a lot of TMs. There's a lot you can do with Stantler. I do think this is the better, like, Misdreavus, except you don't have an immunity, which is, I mean, immunity with Ghost, which we already talked about not being an important thing, but, like, Stantler overall is amazing for a lot of factors. I do think it's better than Granbull because it's not limited by speed. It doesn't hit as hard, but ignoring that, it is still a fantastic option. In fact, I'm very tempted to play an S, but no. The Smeargle is, I guess, is technically better than all of these, just because cool. Hitmontop. Now, The big problem with Hitmontop is that it's very limited in move pool, but it gets access to Intimidate, which we've already talked about as being fucking insane. And at the same time, fighting types, when they do come up, are really, really good usually. Even Heracross being late in the game can really tear apart the end boss. That's not to mention that you get him on top pretty much in the, I want to say, the middle point of the game. You still have access to the entire Shadow Lab and the Under. You have a lot you can do with him on top in that time, and Intimidate is going to come in clutch, just like having one of the best things you can actually do is straight up just have Stantler and Hitmontop double Intimidate and just win. Like, physical attackers can't come back. Meltank comes in clutch as being really late in the game, but Meltank is still a great Pokemon. I still think it's here. You're not going to use it that much, but it does have some viable offerings in some of the post game, which is cool. We got the 3 legendary dogs, which we're going to skip along with this, which comes really late anyway. But we're going to skip to Meditite into Medicham, which has some usability. It's huge power. Like, it's a decent fighting type. Problem is, as a psychic type, it doesn't get a lot of offerings. And its utility, while being decent, is not overly strong. I do think it's better than Sudowoodo. Plusle. This is a very underrated Pokemon. Its ability sucks, yes. But because it has the traded XP, and because its move pool is decent enough to be able to get to Thunderbolt eventually, I do think this is actually up here. It is really fast. It hits pretty hard in comparison to most of the offerings down here. Overall, Plusle is a very worthwhile Pokemon to use. We get into Vibrava into Flygon. Now, you're going to be stuck as Vibrava for a little bit, but eventually, I do think Flygon becomes a very good Pokemon. Not only is it a ground typing, which we've talked about many times, its dragon typing means it's going to resist a lot of weird shit. Its quad weakness to ice means, hey, play a little carefully, but at the same time, it has a great matchup against a lot of the later parts of the game, being able to output Stab Earthquake. It has access to Dragon Breath, which can paralyze. You can even give it Flamethrower, which counters Scizor in the end fight. There's a lot of options you can do for Flygon. I do think it's worse than Quagsire, merely by the fact that you have to put a lot of investment into this, whereas Quagsire, just raise it and it goes the extra mile. Flygon, it could be considered top of A, and I would be fine with it, but I'm going to put it at bottom of S, which goes into actually Swablu into Altaria, whereas Flygon needs a lot of investment. I feel like Altaria does need some investment, but it can work as just a tank into a sweeper. I love using Altaria when I'm not using Flygon. We are limited in Dragon types if you haven't noticed. But I do think Altaria, for a lot of team builds, is actually the better one. If you are lacking a ground type, yes, I do recommend it. Or if you're lacking a kind of hit different super effectives, then yes, Flygon is amazing. If you want a little difference in your flying type, by the way, I didn't mention Levitate, but there's a lot of utility in there. My dog just sneezed. That was hilarious. But Altaria is very special. I do think it is top of here. I'm actually going to put it... I'm going to put it down here because I do think Intimidate does a lot. But Altaria is pretty high up. I'm actually going to put it right there. Tropius, I think, comes really late, and while it does have some usability and some really weird shenanigans, I'm going to put it at the bottom of this. I don't remember where Ursaring still is. Absol is also really late. His Dark type, it does hit pretty hard. Honestly, I kind of want to put it like right here. I think it has some use that I think is special. Yeah. Of course, we have... Tyranitar and Metagross, which come out too late, but I do want to state that Metagross is amazing out of the in-game into the Colosseum mode. It's very special in that, being a steel type, it hits decently hard, it has Meteor Mash for attack boost, and it's probably the only thing that I think can really stop just random shit from killing you. It doesn't do great against the 3 stupid legendaries you fight a lot, but it does decent, so I am going to give it the bottom of B treatment just for being there. Tyranitar, I do think, is a little different because it can't place in the rank 50s of the Colosseums, but it can do it the 100s, and by then, Sandstorm is actually really annoying. You're going to be fighting Kyogre, Groudon, and Rayquaza, and Tyranitar kind of gets trashed by all three. I guess it does good against Rayquaza, but Rayquaza is already weak to ice, and you should have use abilities. I do think it's the worst of them, but we'll put it there. Now we get to the legendary dogs, which all have different use. Entei, it's a health pool. It does have decent stab fire moves. It's a legendary. But when it comes to the fire typing, I do think Typhlosion is probably the better option. It is a decent tank, but it doesn't really do anything super special. This is where we get into Raikou and Suicune. Raikou is one of the best Pokemon in the game, bar none. Not only is it a insane special attacker and speed like Espeon, but it has access to Rain Dance into Thunder, which means you can fulfill a thriving Rain Dance team. When it comes to Raikou, I do think is one of the better options you can pick. However, it is also the last legendary dog you get access to, whereas Suicune is the middle one. Of course, you're not going to do great against Ein. You are going to face a Raikou with a Suicune. Not exactly great, but if you spend the time to actually catch Suicune, it basically, outside of that battle, has so much usability. Just to give an idea, I did the achievement set for Pokemon Colosseum, and on my team was an adamant Suicune. It was still required to bring him because Suicune was that needed for the Colosseum beats. They are ridiculous. It was great against certain like legendaries. It's overall one of the best options out of it, and plus is good if you have a decent nature in game. Even with the bad nature, it still is going to out tank a lot of stuff. You have the Rest Talk setup, which you can do. It has access to Surf, which cool. Does it have access to Surf? I'm pretty sure it's Surf in this game, right? I might be getting confused with something else. This has Surf, right? I don't think this has Surf. I'm forgetting. But it has access to a decent set of moves. So you could do some Toxic Stall. It is the better tank of the game. Of all the tanks in the game, it is the best one. It beats out Umbreon and a lot of stuff. It has a way better matchup against most bosses, in my opinion, than a lot of the heavier hitters. And above all, is a perfect pair with not only Raikou, but a few of the other Pokemon I've pointed out as being like really, really good. So yeah, if I were to kind of create a team, I would probably go... I usually try and avoid using legendaries a lot of the time, if I'm honest. But I'd probably go like Espeon. We'll go Quagsire. I don't like to duel up. We'll do this, we'll do that, and that pretty much. That is a decent team. I think it hits a lot of stuff. But yeah, I think that's every Pokemon in Colosseum ranked. I don't remember where Ursaring is still. It can stay at the bottom B. I don't really care. I kind of agree with D. This is fine. Any switches? I think Bayleaf could probably move up. Actually, Bayleaf can probably move up here. I think Granbull is going to move up. I think Heracross just needs to move down. Because in-game, it's not as useful. In the Colosseum battles, yeah. Ampharos, I think I am going to move down. I've kind of changed a little bit of my mind. I'm going to do this. And I think that's good. I think overall, I'm very tempted to do this. Because it kind of just fixes how this looks. Yeah, you know what? Intimidate, utility, we'll call it that. So, what's your favorite Pokemon in Pokemon Colosseum? And, yeah, I'll catch you guys later. And hopefully you have a great day.